Long throw-ins and set pieces are all the rage, so this is just another element of bringing back 90s football, which I'm all for, mate.
Sling it in the mixer.
And get it on the big man's head.
This is what we want, right? Don't touch it here.
Hasn't quite happened, yes or no? Manchester United host Brighton and Hove Albion in the third round of the FA Cup on Sunday afternoon, amid the latest chapter in the chaos that has been at the Old Trafford club since Ruben Amorim's departure last week. 3 draws on the spin for the Reds, including that 2-2 at Burnley in the week. 2 goals, though, for Benjamin Sesko. Are things looking up, or is it just another meh for Manchester United fans? This is Tactics Exposed Team Talk. I'm Will Pugh. That's SunSport's tactical guru, Dean Scoggins. Dino, as always, we'll be answering 3 questions from the Tactics Exposed Team Talk viewers. Exciting, interesting, annoying, meh times for United. Which one is it?
Yeah, well, a lot of people get annoyed when there's sackings mid-season. I don't, because I get to watch new tactics and a new way of playing and more things to talk about. And yeah, look, it might only be a few games under Darren Fletcher, but he knows what Jason Wilcox and the Man United board want, because otherwise they wouldn't have got rid of Ruben Amorim, would they? So it will be laying foundations for Fletcher, and that's exciting to see. And it might have been a draw at Burnley, but there were some early signs, even after one training session, that Fletcher was moving things around.
Absolutely. I think what Manchester United's hierarchy, including Jason Wilcox, want is don't dig me out in press conferences.
Well, there's probably that, yeah. And remember, you're the head coach, not the manager.
Yeah, exactly that. Right, come on then, Dino. Let's go to question number 1 up here. Where do Bruno Fernandes and Matheus Cunha play in this new setup? Well, this new setup can only really refer to the one game at Burnley. He played 4 at the back, of course. Do you expect the same thing again? And in answer to the question, where do you see those 2 star men fitting in?
The Bruno debate has begun again. We start again. We had this all through Amorim. And look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Bruno Fernandes is their best player, their most important player. And yeah, so just to remind everybody, in that Ruben Amorim setup, which was 3-4-3, I'll just move the board into that setup there for a second. So you get your 3 at the back, you've got your 2 midfield players, and you've got your 3 up front. And Bruno Fernandes, when it first came in, we were debating, would he be one of the 2 10s, or would he be the holding midfielder with a bit of flexibility? He ended up playing the vast majority of games in here, which often meant he was dragged out of position, he goes into other places, and he leaves that midfield unattended, which is where the debate of centre-backs jumping out came from.
And also leaving his midfield partner, which was often Casemiro, with an awful lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And we shouldn't criticise Bruno for that, because he was trying to get on the ball in advanced areas, but that is the knock-on effect of that. So straight away, when we see the other setup, we have 2 at the base of midfield, a number 10, and a more like, under Darren Fletcher in the Burnley game, it was more like, on paper, a 4-2-3-1, and Bruno started the game in his more natural number 10 position. But what's interesting about that was, in the first half, I didn't think United played that great. Right. They didn't, he got on the ball in more advanced areas, but, we had Benjamin Sesko up there, we had Matheus Cunha and Dorgu as the wingers, so Cunha was on the right and Dorgu was on the left. And what was interesting that is, we had Cunha with a right foot on the right side and Dorgu with a left foot on the left side, which is quite unusual at the moment for the way that teams play.
Correct me if I'm wrong, did you not say that a couple of weeks ago?
I did, yeah. And if you've got a centre forward and you're then wanting to go back to basics, you then want right-footers crossing the ball into that area. But what happened with Bruno as the natural 10 in that area was he got crowded out a little bit in those areas by Burnley, they sat back in a 4-5-1, a little bit in the shape that I've got Brighton set up in there. After half-time, credit to Darren Fletcher. Now, Bruno, we knew wasn't going to play 90 minutes because of his injury, but credit to Darren Fletcher. What he did was moved Bruno into this position here. Cunha went back into more of a 10 position where he's more comfortable drifting around the striker. And then Diogo Dalot got into that right wing position. Luke Shaw played more as staying in a back 3, and then you had the 2 midfield players. So I can hear the Man United fans screaming already, oh, it was 3 at the back again. It was 3 at the back. But it wasn't the point of 3 at the back. It was a 3-2-5 attacking shape, which I talk about all the time. But what it meant was Diogo Dalot as the attacking fullback didn't have a great game. and I think it's a position that they need to upgrade on Man United. But it meant that Bruno Fernandes got in this pocket of space, which meant he could cross the ball for Benjamin Sesko. And there was one occasion where Sesko runs in the gap here, Bruno plays him in, goal. Okay, so that is the reason that he did it. And what I liked from that setup is even if Bruno Fernandes starts as nominally the right winger, actually in your attacking setup, you end up with Bruno and Cunha in the positions off the front man. Now, there'll be a big debate when Amad Diallo and Brian Mbeumo come back from the African Cup of Nations, because where do you fit those players in as well? But I tell you what, all of a sudden, that's a nice problem to have.
Exactly.
You've got 5 attacking players, you've got Mason Mount to fit in there as well, and then you've got that tactical flexibility to change things around, which was, that for me, was the criticism of Ruben Amorim. Yeah. It was change the player but not the shape, whereas in this you can say, OK, Bruno started in the middle, didn't quite work, move him to the right-hand side, but he ends up in the inside right pocket, attack up the outside. If that's not working, you can bring on Amad Diallo as a right winger, bring on Brian Mbeumo, go to a 2, and then have Cunha off the left and Bruno in behind. You can change that attacking shape with that group of players, which is not what Ruben Amorim did. So nice early signs from Darren Fletcher in that game. The debate about Cunha as well is that I think that obviously Cunha's not a winger. No. Didn't play there for Wolves, ended up in those positions.
And neither is Bruno really, neither is Mason Mount. No. Mbeumo obviously is, but Amad Diallo, again, he's sort of that weird hybrid between...
Yeah, and so is Patrick Dorgu as well. But what, let's take Manchester City and Arsenal as the sort of on the perch examples here of what you want. Sometimes your width will be provided over here by your fullback. Sometimes, as was the case in the Arsenal-Liverpool game, Jurriën Timber goes into that position there as almost a 10 from fullback, and your width is provided by Bukayo Saka, your winger. So it doesn't have to be that in every attack it's the same player in that rigid position. And that was the problem under Ruben Amorim. And also, if you've got those interchanges, it creates confusion amongst the defence. So if Cunha does nominally start from the left-hand side, but then he comes inside and you've got Patrick Dorgu as the left winger or Amad Diallo or somebody else, you've got a more flexible back line. If then Luke Shaw attacks down the left-hand side, Cunha comes inside, they shuffle across, your right back comes into a 3. You've still got your 3-2-5 attacking shape. So to answer this question, they've both got to play. Yep. And whether one starts as the number 10 and one starts as the right winger or the left winger doesn't really matter, as long as they get into those inside forward positions, playing off the front man, so that they're giving the defenders a problem in that area.
To be honest, Dino, as you're describing all that, obviously Ruben Amorim was very wed to his 3-4-3 system, and it feels at this stage sort of to his detriment. I know we've covered on Tactics Exposed that we think it might have been coming good, but ultimately what you've effectively described there is very, very similar to a system that Manchester City and Arsenal play, and attacking shapes Manchester City and Arsenal play. And you kind of think, well, if it's good enough for them two, it should be good enough for Manchester United with the players they've got. Like, why would they not be employing that system, and why would that not be the future system?
Yeah, I agree. And again, I keep using that, for those of you who've watched Tactics Exposed a lot, thank you. And also,
why?
Yeah, but you've also heard me say a lot, Thomas Tuchel's quote, a formation is just a framework for the players to start within and then move into. And the problem with Ruben Amorim's system was not the system. It was he's saying this position is for your wing-back to get into. This position is your right 8-10. This position is your striker. This is your left 8-10, and so on. And so therefore, they move up and down the pitch in almost this rigid shape, and, ne'er the shape would change. Whereas Arsenal and Manchester City, whether it's 4-3, whether, Man City often get into a 2 and then a base of midfield, and then they push players in there. And it doesn't matter if this is your fullback or this is your fullback or this is your fullback. You've then got 3 attacking players v 3 over there. You've got 3 attacking players v 3 over there. And Man United's players in Ruben Amorim's system could never quite massage it into a position where they had the overloads that he was trying to get. So the reason that 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 has been a more successful system on the whole in the Premier League is because transitions are so fast, it's so physical. Getting from back to front is the most difficult thing to do. And now teams are going more direct. You've got to have these players close to your striker, otherwise he's going to get isolated, and no striker, not even Erling Haaland, is going to be able to hold off two centre-backs and a little holding midfielder buzzing around his feet as well. So that's been the problem. And we saw Benjamin Sesko much better with players around him in the Burnley game.
Yeah, probably worth noting, Dino, I guess, just before we move on to question number 2, unlikely to see Bruno and Cunha against Brighton, do you think?
Possibly, yeah. But maybe you might see them for an hour. And, as they look at it, and, and also they haven't got that many options, United. They've also, we've got Shea Lacey, who came off the bench, and Man United fans should be very, very excited about. He's got that sort of Phil Foden style about him and way of play. And what happened was when he took Bruno Fernandes off Man United, they went a little bit dry, but, they're managing Bruno's injuries. But then they bring Shea Lacey on. He picks the ball up in this inside position. He's got somebody going outside of him, so therefore you attract a defender. You've got this space to run into. We saw him hit the bar, and then we saw another shot flash wide. There was a bit of that Man United youthful exuberance about him, and we haven't seen that in that Ruben Amorim style. We saw Joshua Zirkzee come on and play in the same position and try and do something different in the same position. So there was a bit of variation about United in that game. Look, it was still a draw against Burnley. Let's not get too excited, but Darren Fletcher did only have one training session to try and change things. So hopefully we see a bit more flexibility at the weekend.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Zirkzee obviously come on against Leeds as well, change that game, didn't he? Let's have a look then, Dino, at question number 2. Why does Sesko look a player all of a sudden? Benjamin Sesko, 2 goals at Burnley, of course. I don't think this question would have come in after that Leeds game I just mentioned. Missed a bit of a sitter there, and it was just generally very quiet. Do you agree with that, first of all, and then what's the answer?
Well, yeah, I agree with the fact he looked a player in the second half against Burnley, and there's a confidence element to that as well, isn't there? He got his goal, and then all of a sudden the striker goes from 6 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 because he's got his goal, and managers can't do a great deal about that. That's down to the player. So a lot of it, I thought against Leeds, he tried very hard, but the problem was, and we've got a really good touch map to show this, is that he ended up in sort of this position here a lot, and he ended up coming and getting the ball down here and coming and getting the ball down here. And even if you do really good hold-up work in this position here, you then, attract players towards you. Let's say you play a nice move where you've dropped in, you've won possession as a striker, you play a nice little pass off and then the ball gets wide. Look how far you've got to travel. If that cross comes early, which it should, into that area there, look how far you've got to travel to go and get on the end of it. And against Leeds, the touch map was scattergun. It was all over the place. Against Burnley, he's obviously had this instruction from Darren Fletcher of, if we're in build-up play and we're trying to play the ball into you, let's move them back into that sort of 3-2-5 attacking shape. If you're in build-up play, we want you involved to hold the ball up and bring these players around you into play, okay? If then United get back up into a more attacking position, we don't want you here. So we don't want you on the edge of the box getting involved in play in that area. And that touch map shows that. What we want is big striker in penalty area. Right? And that was so obvious in the second half. I've got this vision of Fletcher or one of the analysts or one of the coaches in the changing rooms at halftime going to Benjamin Sesko, this is what we want, right? Don't touch it here. And spending 15 minutes with him, because the second half, then all of a sudden, you get Bruno in that position. There was a cross from Casemiro where Dubravka makes a great save, where they work a position, United, where the cross can come from deep. And then you've got your 6 foot, whatever, is he 6'4", 6'5" striker in the position where the ball goes in. And I tell you what, centre halves, Erling Haaland, they don't want him there. No. And that's all of a sudden where Benjamin Sesko is. He's got this amazing leap on him. And, his heading ability needs a bit of work. And, if he could head it down powerfully like Haaland does, he's going to be able to get to those levels of headed goals as long as the crosses come in. So, there's 2 things as a striker. Yes, we want you involved in link-up play, and we saw much more direct passes from Darren Fletcher's setup where the ball was being fired into him in that corridor. But then when we've got possession in this area, do what Haaland does,
get in the box.
Yeah. Like, and strikers, you know, they score 90% of their goals inside the area. And it was really great to see, you know, they paid a lot of money for him and take a bit of the pressure off him in what he's got to do in those areas. And against Leeds, there was balls flashed across the face of goal and he wasn't in there.
Yep.
There was that one chance you mentioned that was cut back to him and he should have done better. But there were crosses that were going in that he wasn't on the end of. And often it's difficult for a striker. Even, you know, we've seen it with Gyökeres, even for the likes of Haaland, where if a winger gets in this position here and fires it across the face, it's hard sometimes for strikers to keep up with play there. It happens. But if United are going to go back to crossing the ball, which it looks like they are, with left footers on the left, right footers on the right, players in the pocket to cross it in, get in the box, son, get in the middle, get in that. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has scored 8 goals from the penalty spot this season.
Yep.
Do that, keep it simple and score goals.
Well, this season, Dino, long throw-ins and set pieces are all the rage. So this is just another element of bringing back 90s football, which
absolutely,
I'm all for, mate.
Sling it in the mixer.
Get it on the big man's head. Right, question number 3 then, Dino. Does this finally give Kobbie Mainoo a chance? This, I assume, meaning just the fact that Ruben Amorim's gone. He didn't fancy him. They had a little bit of a tiff with some public sort of declarations of unhappiness, either direct or indirect, from Kobbie Mainoo. Obviously a player in there, great for England, really looked like his career was going to blossom. Hasn't quite happened. Yes or no?
I mean, yes, hopefully, yes. I mean, he's one of the ones that he's been one of the sticks to beat Amorim with a little bit. And there has got to be a bit of responsibility on the player because at the moment, we've not seen, certainly, and obviously Ruben Amorim hadn't seen enough to get Kobbie Mainoo onto that starting team. And, I mean, there was the occasion where Casemiro was suspended and you thought, well, Mainoo's got to play, and then he gets injured and then Ugarte comes in. But just let's just talk about the setup and what that means again. So if we go back to that 4... You know, we'll leave the attacking players up there.
Leave the big man in the box.
Yeah, we'll leave the big man in the box, absolutely. But, you know, so lots of teams will, let's say Arsenal in this example, right? Odegaard there, Declan Rice there and Zubimendi there. That doesn't mean as they play out that Rice and Zubimendi are going to be on the same line. That it's going to mean often that Zubimendi goes there and Rice goes in there to join Odegaard, okay? So that's a fairly simple way of getting the ball out of those positions. And so what Man United never did in that setup was trust Kobbie Mainoo to be the single pivot in that midfield.
Yep.
And I think that's a shame. And but part of that reason was in that 3 at the back setup, let's move the wing back on, let's move the other wing back on. You ended up a bit like this, where it was a bit like, well, are you trusting him there? How does he get the ball out? But if we then move it into the 3 at the back system, where he's then the single pivot, and we talked about Bruno moving into a more attacking position, what then happened for United is you've got the 2 centre-backs like that, we move the wing-backs on, and then you've got this defensive responsibility where, you know, and again, was he playing the ball in there? Is he physical enough in transition? Was he working hard enough? And Casemiro or Ugarte are the safer bet in a defensive position there. But then let's reset again to what a 4 would look like, okay? So if you had a 4-2-3-1, you then could say, well, in attacking positions, Casemiro's the one that then does that job. The fullback, can push on. The two wide players can move into that attacking shape of 5 up. And then Kobbie Mainoo has got the flexibility to be the one who can play those little bounce passes, which is great out of getting out of those positions, and then be the one that goes into those positions ahead of the game to get your 2 10s into position. So in a 4 at the back system, he much more suited to it. You know, it's a bit more like when you watch England, we've seen England with Rice and Anderson together, where Anderson can be the ball player, bouncing the ball around and moving it around, and he's still got Declan Rice there to do that, you know, leg work and muscle work for him. If that was Casemiro and Mainoo, or Mainoo and Ugarte, then Mainoo's got that little bit of security, but then in an attacking shape, they've got that extra ball player, because let's be honest, Ugarte can't pass it like Mainoo can. No. Casemiro's long-range passing is good, but he doesn't bounce the ball in like Kobbie Mainoo does. So, yes, hopefully that gives him the chance. And look, it also, tactical flexibility again. If it's not working with the double pivot, bring Kobbie Mainoo on and make the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, of course, with all those changes that Dino's discussing, that with Betfair's Safe Sub, your bet isn't over if the player you have backed gets subbed off, because your bet simply rolls on to the player who comes on. So if Casemiro starts, you've backed him to get a yellow card. That doesn't happen. He gets hauled off. Mainoo comes on and then he gets a yellow. Well, you still get paid out. Happy days. Dino, we haven't done a lot of chatting there about the actual Brighton game on the weekend. It's one of those periods. It's more of what I like to call a macro period for a club. So like the game before and the game coming up, though important, they're not sort of as important as the bigger picture at the club. Just as far as the Brighton game goes on Sunday, good opportunity for Darren Fletcher to get a bit of sort of feel-good factor and actually get a win, because it's been a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And Old Trafford, get them off their seats. Again, I mentioned Shea Lacey, get him some minutes, get Kobbie Mainoo back in. That'll be a big cheer from the home crowd. And look, I know the Burnley game was another draw against a relegation type team.
Relegated team.
Well, yeah, fair. Let's give, Scott Parker's got a chance, hasn't he? They might catch Tottenham at this rate.
Well, they'll catch West Ham.
Yeah, but it's one of those, to bring that feel-good factor back. And I know we haven't talked about Brighton very much there, but Brighton obviously play out from the back. They try and goad you on. They try and hit direct passes into the wingers. United will obviously have to be aware of that, but it also could make for a very exciting type of game where if United go for it, Brighton certainly will. So therefore, yeah, let's hope for an exciting game. And you're right, bring a bit of feel-good factor back to Old Trafford amongst all the moaning and the doom and gloom.
Yeah, exactly. Exciting times, I think, for Manchester United fans. That game in the FA Cup Sunday afternoon. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Tactics Exposed Team Talk. Make sure you like the video. Let us know what you think of what we're about to say in the comments. And of course, make sure you are subscribed to SunSport. And we will be back next week, as always, to look ahead to those massive Premier League games when it returns.